Hello, hello, hello. Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Harrison. I run the Milwaukee office of BioForward, and I hope you all enjoyed lunch. We had a great awards ceremony there. That's always a fun time to see these impressive people. And we have something equally impressive coming up right now for our ESG session. This session is sponsored by Foley Lardner, and I just want to introduce Lisa Marie Collins, who's going to welcome you to the panel.
Thank you very much, Mike, for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am an attorney at Foley Lardner in our Milwaukee office. Foley Lardner is a proud sponsor of this session and of BioForward Wisconsin. Although Foley Lardner is a large international firm with 26 offices worldwide, Foley has its roots firmly planted in Wisconsin, where it was founded over 182 years ago, and where it remains a dedicated supporter of Wisconsin's biohealth industry. So on behalf of my colleagues at Foley, I'm honored to introduce this ESG panel, which will explore the importance of ESG to biohealth companies, an area in which companies large and small face competing interests. Seemingly no matter how you proceed, there are risks and rewards, and we're looking forward to hearing from our experts on this topic. Our panelists this afternoon include Sarah Slack, our moderator, Dustin Andre, Kamaljit Jackson, and Michael Cohen. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, Mike and Lisa Marie. Great to be here this afternoon. My name is Sarah Slack. I'm a partner with Foley Lardner in the Environmental Practice Group and a member of the energy sector, where I do a lot of compliance counseling associated with ESG considerations. I'm excited to have our panelists join us today for this discussion. A couple of logistic comments first. First of all, if you guys could all silence your cell phones, that would be great. Second of all, if you do have questions, we welcome questions during the course of the discussion, as well as at the end. We have a mic set up in the middle aisle here, so if you do have a question, if you just want to proceed over to that mic, when we have a moment, I'll address you, and we'll turn the mic on so that you can ask your question, and everybody, including the panelists, can hear it. As we get started today, we are going to kick off with a bit of a technology, excellent, there we go. A bit of an ESG primer. We expect that there are some of you in the audience who are at different points in your ESG journey/experience, right? Some of you may already be participating or involved with companies that have extensive programs, are doing lots of implementation, are very thoughtful about this. But some of you may just still be gathering information, wanting to learn more about what ESG is and what it means and how you guys can implement it into your operations. So with that, I'm going to do a little bit of a background primer to frame the rest of our discussion. So first, what is ESG? Simply, it's an acronym. It does, in fact, have the three letters ESG, and the first is environment. So with respect to environmental considerations from an ESG perspective, those are going to include things like emissions that people think of as being obvious environmental considerations, but they also include things like product stewardship information, how your waste is managed, and then also your energy efficiency and energy considerations. So all of those are elements of the E for the environmental. The second letter there is S for social. Social is going to really be the concept and idea associated with how your company takes social accountability with respect to its employees, its community, its position in the community, how it treats its customers and various different groups and peoples. So that's the S, the social of ESG. And then the G, the final letter, is governance. And that gets to how these principles are incorporated through into companies and corporations, into their governance system? Is it something that the board of directors is paying attention to? Do you have a director of sustainability? Do you have a director of DEI? Are there various entities who are focused in on this? So the governance aspect captures that element of it. So, what is ESG? Again, this is just a little bit more background, and due to the way we're set up here, I apologize, I gotta throw on my readers so I can see my printouts. So the factors that really, why ESG is important is that a lot of times investors, consumers, and corporations are holistically assessing their performance value and investment in the company based on ESG considerations. This is a really important element for a number of different entities. And I note that even if your entity is a smaller entity, it may not be publicly traded, or you may not have a lot of investors. It may be that your customers or the people that you provide products to are concerned about this. So there are still incentives and bases for focusing on this. ESG also is an assessment of the corporate responsibility, considering those social factors. Like I said, how are you treating your employees, peoples, communities, and things of that nature? And then some companies have stated goals and objectives to create a favorable environmental and social impact. Oftentimes those are just driven by investors or the company's own decision-making process, where they may decide that they want to reduce emissions or ensure that they are hiring diverse peoples and things of that nature. So sometimes it's just a drive to do those types of things through stated goals and objectives. Also, ESG has become a critical consideration for corporate operations. It often drives focus on supply chain management, regulatory and compliance issues, and socially responsible policies. Supply chain is one of the most complicated aspects of ESG, and really that's something that I think we'll get to dive into in a lot more detail here with our panelists. But that is a significant factor with trying to, first of all, evaluate what your supply chain impacts are, and then figure out how you can incorporate that into your own goals. The ESG does require kind of a group effort with respect to kind of legal and regulatory folks working with social accountability folks, and then corporate responsibility, because there are all of those different aspects, right? There are going to be certain regulations, for example, related to environmental, where you may be required to manage waste in a certain way or to limit your emissions in certain ways. And then there's going to be social accountability, where you may have your HR team involved. And then again, just incorporating that all through into the governance aspect. So who is interested in ESG? I've mentioned customers several times, but one of the things that's really interesting about ESG is how market-driven it has been historically. We are seeing more and more laws that are actually enforced and are going to require certain disclosures or actions, but historically there's been a lot of drive just based on market demand, because customers are looking for certainty that products are safer, that they're reducing environmental impact associated with developing those products. Customers are also wanting to make sure that employees are treated well, and there's just a variety of things that customers are concerned with. Traditional shareholders is another group that we see as being very interested in ESG, in large part because they don't want to see the company that they've made a significant investment in be on the front page of a newspaper as having had some sort of issue arise with respect to this. So we are seeing more and more interest by shareholders with respect to ensuring ESG considerations are being taken into account. Then you have modern and activist shareholders. We're seeing a rise in that, even it continues to build, but basically those are investors or shareholders who are specifically taking ESG positions and are pushing those through entities. We've seen that with some of the large oil companies in particular. Investors who are looking to make investments, they may want to make sure that their investment impact is going to support ESG considerations, or that a company is aware of and incorporating those issues into their values so that they can be comfortable and confident in their investment, both from a return perspective, but then also possibly from, again, achieving their own goals. Suppliers are interested in ESG considerations because, again, they're considering environmental impacts associated with those supply chains, as well as manufacturing and labor practices. Governments are interested. There are a variety of different governmental entities at various levels of state and federal authority that are enacting laws related to ESG considerations. Communities are interested in ESG because of the environmental impact that certain operations may have on those communities, as well as considerations related to local employment and training opportunities. Wages, emergency response issues associated with potential catastrophic events, and then also diversity of employment. And then employees are concerned with ESG because of concerns that could jeopardize the company and their jobs, as well as labor relations, wages, work-life balance, all kinds of things. So I'm not going to describe each of these, but just again to help frame our discussion and for some context, there are a number of ESG laws that are already in place. I mentioned earlier that a lot of ESG has historically been market-driven, but we are seeing more and more laws that are going into effect that are requiring certain considerations related to ESG. So for example, here, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act prevents use of certain labor to protect peoples and ensure that the supply chain does not rely on certain types of labor. The SEC has a couple of different policies in effect. Most recently, the SEC climate-related disclosure rules came out. Those are currently voluntarily stayed pending a challenge to them, but we anticipate that they will be finalized and in effect soon. We also see states being active in this space. I put a couple of California laws up here just because California tends to lead on certain issues, and this is certainly one of those areas where California has been very active. The California Transparency and Supply Chain Act is a really broad law that applies to a lot of entities and basically requires that you disclose information related to your efforts to evaluate and ensure that slave labor is not used in any of your supply chains. Again, it's a pretty broad law, and it requires a disclosure or posting on company's website. These next three laws are a suite of laws associated with certain climate-related disclosures. The thing that's interesting about these is that, several of them have already gone into effect and will require reporting as soon as next year. So it's important to be aware of those and know whether or not your company may be required to comply. And as active as we've been in the United States, I think it's safe to say that the EU has been even more active and has a lot, is in some ways a little bit ahead with respect to specific regulation associated with ESG. So to the extent that you are involved with or work with multinational entities, they may be already very focused. In particular, the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and the CSDDD, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, are coming into effect in the near term and will require certain disclosures based on a variety of factors, including mostly where the total sales that a company has and locations and things of that effect. But again, we're seeing that a lot of the entities that we work with that are multinational are already, full force, have groups working on these. And I think that some of our panelists will touch on them. So the next thing that we're going to do here is we have some questions for our panelists. And the first question that I wanted to pose is one related to kind of what ESG means to each of these organizations and or the people with whom they work. And what we decided would be most beneficial for you guys is each of the panelists is going to come up here and present some information from a slide. And so again, our question is, what does ESG mean to you / your organization and to the people with whom you work? And first I'm going to ask Dustin to come up.
Okay, hello everyone. Hope you're all doing well. A couple of disclaimers first off. Whenever I say sustainability, I'm referring to ESG just because in MilliporeSigma, we have enough acronyms. So to simplify, we just say sustainability. Also, like in the different functions that people have, they kind of can relate the word sustainability to whatever they're doing. And it's just a lot more overarching, let's say, and it's more, it's relatable. So to answer your first question, what is ESG to us or sustainability to MilliporeSigma? It's core to our business at this point. So MilliporeSigma has a massive portfolio of over 300,000 different materials, and with this, we needed an approach where we could target things with KPIs, with specific objectives. So to do this, on the left side, you can see just a standard product life cycle from designing a product, from manufacturing a product, packaging it, shipping it to a customer, and then in the purple hexagon, you have the end of life. So we took this and basically assigned specific targets, also in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and I'll highlight that in the next slide. But on the left side here, you can see that we have pretty general goals here. We only have 3 overarching sustainability goals, and the first one being dedicated to human progress, second one being partnering for sustainable business impact, and then reducing our ecological footprint. Now, these seem pretty broad, they seem okay, but in reality, we do have very specific targeting policies that aim at improving each function here in the product life cycle. And this is how we kind of took on this improvement. So real quickly here too, nice, it worked first time. These, just for your information, I'm just gonna show these briefly, these are the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They were developed in try to like give a clear picture into the different areas that different companies can kind of standardize like messaging around different improvements. But yeah, so these are tied to these goals as well. And really quickly too, just in case, just to make sure that we're all on the same base, here I have a picture of the greenhouse gases. So this is depicting scope 1, 2, and 3. You hear this all the time when hearing or like when talking about sustainability. But what is scope 1, 2, and 3? It's really simple. Scope 1 is all the emissions that you produce within a company. Scope 2 is all the emissions that you purchase or energy that you purchase externally. And then 3 is everything else, packaging, transportation. You can see all the different groups between the two blue arrows. So the question is what is it to us and how do we do it? You've seen our goals. We're kind of like the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, in that we have specialists in every different area. We have chemists with PhDs re-engineering chemicals to be more sustainable. We have DCs putting in new renewable energy, and we have smaller boxes too. And just a couple of metrics too on these scopes. Interesting for our company is we've reduced our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 37% since 2020, and it also enacted 76% renewable energy or converted our energy to renewable energy. And all meanwhile, we've seen a 26% growth too, so which is pretty crazy. We're growing and still improving. And yeah, also another disclaimer is I'm gonna reference packaging a lot because that's my expertise. So that's all. Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
great. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, let's do that again. I know you just had lunch. Good afternoon. I want to make sure you're all awake. That wonderful. So how many of you have heard of the MBDA Center? 2 people. How exciting. So I can make stuff up and nobody would know the difference, right? Okay. So we are the Wisconsin Minority Business Development Agency Business Center. We are situated under the U.S. Department of Commerce. Our headquarters are situated in DC. There are approximately 43 centers nationally, okay? And what we do is we provide a holistic approach to our minority business enterprises to ensure that they are a part of supplier diversity, whether that's from a corporation perspective, whether that's from a federal, state, or local contract perspective, ESG specifically from a social responsibility perspective, the S in ESG, for us is to make sure that we're leveling the playing field for our minority-owned businesses. Okay, does that make sense? So we provide MBEs in the state of Wisconsin, okay, to provide access to capital. And we have some very, very strict goals in terms of how much access to capital we need to provide. Roughly, the first year is about $75 million. We have to meet those goals per federal standards and regulations, in addition to increasing profits by $25 million a year. That's a lot. So what do? We provide access to capital, we provide contracting services, we provide one-on-one coaching and technical assistance. We also do community building, partnership building. One of the other components of our work is around certifications. Most of you that have a supplier diversity program within your corporations require that MBEs be certified. You have a very specific spend goal within your budget. For example, an organization might have, we want to spend $100 million in the next 3 years in ensuring that we have diverse suppliers providing us products or services, okay? Why is the S in ESG so important to our organization? Is because we want to level the playing field. This is about building generational prosperity for our MBEs. It's critical to the economy, it's critical to our MBEs, it's critical to your organization, it's critical from a global competitiveness perspective. If we truly are a global economy, we will need to be making sure that our suppliers are diverse in nature when we're doing business with them. That is the linchpin of our work, and why the social component of this is really, really important to us from an organizational perspective, and also to hold people accountable to that work. Thank you.
So which states don't have a minority center?
Oh, you would ask me that.
Of course.
Well, I can get you that listing. But for example, Iowa does not have an MBDA center. So what happens with our centers is that we can cross boundaries to support those MBEs, that there's not a center. So we can go anywhere in the United States to be able to help support MBEs. But that's
Well,
one
now I
state.
know.
Yeah.
So Sarah, you asked about what does ESG mean to me or to us, and I think I'll have to ask, has anyone heard of PPD, ThermoFisher? Any hands? Okay.
Oh, wow.
Sorry. We're not a minority-owned business. Well, no. Had to check, right? So, if you think about life sciences and healthcare, the reason that I think everybody who's kind of in this room and connected to biotech or biohealth in some way, it's about helping people and advancing patient care. And our mission, I think it ties into kind of the Simon Sinek mindset of what is your why, right? What is your why? Well, our mission or our why is to make the world cleaner, healthier, and safer. I probably got it in the wrong order, but that gives you these sense, right? And so when you think about ESG connects back to kind of the mid-1980s Burkhardt Commission from the UN that defined sustainable development as development that enables future generations to meet their needs, right? And I think that mindset of how are what we doing set up the world for our kids and our kids' kids so that they can also meet their development needs is really important. I think the work that you're doing as you think about, like you said, we're trying to create generational life businesses that can be passed on, right? So I think there's connections across the E, the S, and the G to that mindset. So I just wanted to put this up a little bit to kind of highlight some of the things that we do. This is obviously not a comprehensive, but to give you a sense, a lot of these things can be found in corporate social responsibility reports. Almost all Fortune 500 or publicly traded companies or even private companies will have these. So I think if it's something that you're interested in looking at, either a company that you're looking to invest in or maybe work with or work for, I urge you to look at their CSR report, and you'll see a lot of the different things that they're doing within the three E, S, and G. One of the things I want to just highlight a little bit to get back to that why, as we think about advancing healthcare and advancing science, we want to make sure that our children and children are looking at science and STEM careers and are interested in that space. And so that's something that's very kind of core to our ESG strategy as you think about how do we engage our community around science. And so we have a young innovation competition. We have 60,000 middle schoolers around the U.S. that engage in this. A 12-year-old won, and she came up with a fire prevention system, and that one was what won across the entire competition last year, or in 2023. So I think, again, it's about how does what your ESG strategy is, how does that connect back to what you're doing? You know, I've talked to a lot of businesses where, you know, they're giving free things to veterans, and it's a great thing to do, but how, you know, they struggle maybe with, like, how does that connect into what our business is? And I think if you're doing things with an ESG, and I think this probably gets back to what you're probably going to talk about in terms of the regulations, it's important to think about why are you doing what you're doing, and how does that connect into the mission of your company? Maybe it's advancing, you know, veteran-owned businesses because they have good ideas, or there's something connection. Like there should be a good story that you're telling of why you're engaging with your community in this way. And I think that's something that we try to really focus in on is, you know, we're investing in, you know, renewable energy because that impacts human health, that impacts our local communities. We're trying to make everything cleaner and healthier for our communities. You know, we do a lot of work in diversity within clinical research and clinical trials. And the reason we do it is because that not only there's a lot of historical issues with minorities being in clinical research, there are medical and biological differences that need to be evaluated as we advance medications to market. So those are the kinds of things I think we should all think about as you look at what is your ESG strategy, why are you investing in a specific project, a specific group. You know, we aren't doing this just for fun, we're doing it because we want to advance science, or we want to advance minority-owned businesses or science as well, right? So I think that's kind of the tie-in. So Sarah, I know you have a lot more questions for us, so I'll stop talking and hand it over to you.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Thank you, Michael. All right. Well, I do have a number of questions for you guys. And so the first one is, you know, what you guys have given us a really great background about what ESG means to your company, or the companies that you work with. But if you could describe some of the ways that you've actually implemented some ESG policies into your system and supply chains, maybe give some examples, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So to set the stage, I guess, towards, like, if you don't really understand MilliporeSigma or what we sell, is we are a life science company. So when I mentioned we have 300,000 different materials, we sell flavors, fragrances, chemicals, anything you name it, from small little tiny like vials of material to massive production bulk material. And to answer this question about policies and challenges with policies relating to sustainability, it's important to know that because shipping hazardous materials sustainably is really challenging, and especially trying to set up programs, as we call them instead of policies, to allow and enable these different groups to succeed in making sustainable changes in this very difficult field. So it's not about, it's less about just simply making a box smaller. It's more about, you know, it's got to be more sustainable while still allowing and maintaining sterility, keeping corrosive materials inside their package, or keeping cold products cold. So specifically to packaging, we have our own program called Smash Packaging. And in this program, we aim at using better materials, and it's all defined, of course, better is vague, but using better materials that allow for recycling, using paper materials that are safely sourced so that we know that it's not coming from like some deforestation clear-cut operation. Lots of different specific targets within just packaging, but a specific example that I wanted to share with you is this challenging project that I'm working on right now. It's called our Greener Coolers project. And this project is aiming at replacing our EPS coolers, or our styrofoam coolers, that are used to ship cold products, freezer products, stuff that are really critical to research, to whatever you're using these cold products for, they must stay cold. And we are trying to replace these EPS coolers with a paper cooler, or like a curbside recyclable cooler. For a number of reasons, EPS is getting banned. Again, like it's another California law, which is great. I think it's leading the change. But this project is super challenging because EPS is just really good at what it does. But the way that we find we're working towards progress and working towards a solution in this really difficult area is working really closely with all the different parties involved. So we are working with external partners. We're working with external testing facilities. We're all like coordinating and being completely transparent. We have nothing to hide with these people that are trying to also see the same goal as us. So just opening communication channels and being completely transparent as to what your goal is, and that making sure that everyone is working towards the same goal, and using these policies to reinforce, like, hey, this is what we're working for because of this, and it's going to be really cool and a unique product. So it's less about, just I just get really excited about packaging because because it's easier to visualize an actual change from an EPS cooler as opposed to still very important scope 1 and 2 kilograms of materials reduced or energy reduced. But packaging is really cool because you actually get to visually see the change and visually see the new product and new innovative kind of materials. Thank you.
Thanks, Dustin. That's great. And one of the things I just wanted to note is how this area is with a lot of other environmental areas where some of the regulations are actually driving innovation. And that sounds like one of the things that you were talking about, which is that, some of the regulations are looked at as being limits or restrictions and or bans ultimately, but that provides opportunities for innovation that, it's pretty cool and exciting. And I think a lot of us in this room are probably pretty excited about those types of things. So great, thank you. So I guess, Kamaljit, do you want to go next? Yes,
Yeah. Just a reminder that the MBDA is a social impact organization. We are a not-for-profit. So every policy that we develop, any strategy, always places our minority business enterprises at the center of that work. We want to make sure that we're getting to economic parity. And I'll share some data in a little bit with the next question, but just to make sure that we are narrowing that gap from a wealth perspective, right? To make sure that our MBEs are able to, again, have a level playing field, making sure that we're hiring top talent that are mission driven. We're mission driven first. Is to make sure that our MBEs are getting the contracts, they're getting the technical assistance, they're getting the access to capital. There's significant disparities when it comes to access to capital for our communities of color. Significant. So it is our job from an advocacy perspective and working with our partners to make sure that we have aligned partners that can help narrow that gap. You probably have heard a lot on the news that a lot of Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies are backing away from their supplier diversity programs and their DEI efforts, and then also stepping away from the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index. I'm going to call some of these organizations out, corporations out right now because it's public knowledge, okay? But when you think about Ford Motor, you think about Lowe's, you think about Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson just early October backed out of that. We have John Deere and Company, Molson Coors, Brown-Forman, Tractor Supply Company, Toyota Motor Corporation, Jack Daniels. Higher education is going through that right now. Also the end of affirmative action. You might not realize that that has an impact on MBEs, but it does. In addition to a lot of the DEI jobs are going away, supplier diversity jobs are going away. And how do we support that? Because when you're thinking about the challenges and why we do this work, and I think Sue said it really, really well during the lunch, because it's hard work, and it's meaningful work, and it has value, and it creates community. And we got to get rid of this gap that's existing currently around wealth, generational prosperity, and supplier diversity. We have to do it. We have to do it because it's great for the economy, it's great for our future generation, and by 2045, the US population will be 50% people of color. You're not going to have a choice. So why don't we get our people ready right now so we can be globally competitive? So everything that we do centers around our MBE, advocacy, any policies that we develop to make sure that they get a level playing field. It's really, really hard work. It's hard work, but we do it, and we continue to do it because it's meaningful to us.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Kamaljit, and that was fabulous, really, really important information that you shared. And I think that just to summarize, it sounds like the hurdle you've really identified is some of the legal decisions that come out of especially the Supreme Court that have taken us a step back from affirmative action and some of the other programs that have historically supported minority businesses and minority people. So,
Can I just add something to
please.
that? I'm sure, these are well-known companies, but there's also small businesses that are not considered minority business enterprises that are also going the legal route because they want support from the MBDA Center or from organizations that cater specifically to level the playing field for our communities of color. That also does a lot of damage. Significant damage. And so when people ask me, well, how do you define from an MBE? Who's considered an MBE? So I'm gonna read you the definition so you understand that anybody that walks through our doors through the MBDA Center, we will continue to support, irrespective of race, gender, sexual orientations. I'm just gonna read this to you because this is really important. It's important to our work. This is federally defined for the work that we do. A business owned by socially or economically disadvantaged individuals. This means that a business owner of any race or ethnicity may be eligible for services if their membership in a group resulted in experiencing racial or ethnic prejudice, cultural bias, or an impairment of their ability to compete in the free enterprise system due to diminished capital and credit opportunities. Again, so think about disparities that exist from access to capital, increase in profits, jobs created and retained. Very, very difficult for our communities of color and those individuals that are socially and economically disadvantaged. I wanted to give you that definition because I know somewhere you're like, well, what is an MBE? What does it really consist of? So I want to make sure you have that definition. Thank you, Sarah.
All right, Michael, do you have some information to share with us?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, not to repeat everything you guys have said, I think what we found to be, I think, very successful is when the customer or the work that we're doing really resonates or needs sustainability or social equity built into the work, right? So I mentioned diversity in clinical research and clinical trials. We have a whole team dedicated to how do we make clinical studies relevant to disadvantaged or usually left behind healthcare communities. Not only because there's research and scientific benefit, but also, medications are more successful when they when they have representative populations. I think the COVID vaccines are probably the most famous in that, needing really minority buy-in, not just sort of the majority buy-in to be effective. What I always kind of say is I go back to our customers. I say, keep pushing us, keep asking for these things, right? Because I think you mentioned it. Sustainability, whether that means ESG, whether that means DEI, should not be seen as purely a green premium or purely an added expense or purely another box to check. It should be viewed as a pressure for innovation. It should be viewed as a way to force you to come up with a better way to do something, because just because we've been doing this for 20 years or 30 years or 50 years or 100 years does not make it the best way to do something. So I think that's the lens that I would kind of urge people to take and urge people to think about is, ESG is not a tax. ESG is not a way to slow down progress. ESG is a force to force us to think again and think about how we're doing things and innovate to solve the problems in a new way and hopefully a better way.
Very good. And so, We've talked a little bit about what ESG is to your organization. You've represented a little bit with respect to, how you guys have incorporated in. But, again, why is ESG policy an important aspect of your organization or your organization's goals? Do you perceive it as being regulatory driven? Is it something that is just part of your values? And here I think that the question we're trying to get to is, where's the balance there? Because there are regulatory drivers, as we've discussed, but then there are other factors that different entities take into account. And I'd really like to hear about that from you guys.
Thank you. So why it's important to MilliporeSigma is because these ESG or these sustainability policies that we've kind of developed internally alongside these other external kind of guidance systems and laws, they're really important because we use them in a way that it's not just you must meet this target, you must do this with whatever your part of the life cycle is. We use them as tools. We have different methods within these policies that allow us to enable these different groups of people to find ways that they can innovate in their areas. Again, if we talk about packaging, our policy, in our smash packaging policy, we have ways that these are the best materials. We've already done a bunch of testing. So does your functional area have ways to change your materials from having this coating or having these different things to using these sectioned materials, or do you find something else in the market? Because the market in sustainability, especially in packaging, but in general right now, sustainability is ever evolving, and it feels like year to year there's new technology coming out all the time. So having a policy in place that enables people to go out and find new tech or new applications for the stuff that they do, that they can make a new unique packaging or new unique process, new system for renewable energy, for example. These different groups feel really encouraged and really motivated because it's booming right now. Everyone's excited to make a change and actually do something that's different in their areas. And so these policies allow us to highlight people making changes and people making improvements, and kind of changing expectations that everything has to kind of stay the same, and we're just going to try and squeeze out some numbers wherever we can shave a couple of inches off the corrugated box or something like that. So yeah, these policies help us and help our people in our groups to get motivated in their work too. It's really cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Dustin. Kamaljit?
Yes, so there are federal requirements as corporations look at supplier diversity and funding, and they have to have such a percentage of diverse suppliers. Yes, those are really, really important. Our organization, if I go back to history about 60 plus years ago, the MBDA Center was born out of the Nixon era because there was no diversity, there was no supplier diversity at all. And the MBDA came to play, and it probably about 25, 30 years ago became a permanent agency. And so very analogous, if you know what CRA credits are on the banking side, where you have to make sure that you're serving the underserved communities and communities of color specifically from access to capital, et cetera. So when I think about, yes, there's federal regulations, and yes, it's important from that aspect, but I think about community, and I think about how do we make our communities better and best and a level playing field so everybody that has hopes and dreams can achieve them. Everybody has that right, especially in the United States, to be able to make their dreams come true. That's why we do the work that we do and advocate continuously to make sure that you're thinking about, not as an afterthought, not because you have spent dollars, not because it's a federal requirement on certain components or state requirements, because it's the right thing to do for your neighbors, for your industry. Because again, in 2045, there's going to be a lot of people of color, and you're not going to have a choice. So prepare yourself today. Because look at this room, look around this room. Who do you see? Not a whole lot of people of color in here. That's why we do the work. That's why it's important.
Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's about the stakeholders that you kind of mentioned at the beginning, right? It's what are all of the different stakeholders in your business, in our business, that are invested in the future of what ThermoFisher is, in the future of what healthcare is, in the future of science. I mean, that's why we engaged with 60,000 middle schoolers to create science projects. That's why we are trying to get patients in an electric vehicle when they come to a study. That's why we're building green committees at our sites to engage our colleagues around recycling and reusing cups and different things like that. I think it kind of gets back to sustainable development. It's how do we keep our business going for the future and prepare it for what the future may hold, but also building it sustainably in such a way that, Mark Casper, who's our CEO, his children will have a future world that looks as much as possible like the world we all live in today, or his children's children or our children's children, right? So I think that's not only about preparing sort of communities for a scientific, engaging in science and valuing science and seeing science as the path forward within innovation and economic development, but also within sustainable development, so that science and sustainability and ESG can all kind of move forward together in a hopefully a better future.
Can I add something?
Please.
He just triggered something in my head here. Two numbers that I want you guys to remember. If you don't remember anything that I've said, remember these two things. There's a $7 trillion gap for MBEs in comparison to minority versus non-minority firms. $7 trillion in terms of contracts. Okay? It is going to take us 333 years to get to economic parity. 333 years. I don't know about all of you, but I'm not going to be here in 300 years.
The average temperature will be like 120 in Madison,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
probably. So think about that. We've already spent 400 years. Already. Now we're adding another 300 and some years to that to get to a level playing field. I don't know how that data sits with you, but when I look at that every single day, it drives me crazy. We got to reduce that. Let's make it 10 years. That's doable. What's the temperature going to be in 10 years, Michael?
Madison?
Yeah. Please remember those numbers. They're really, really important. That's what also drives our work, too, because this data is real time. This is 2024 data, and it keeps getting worse.
Can I add something? So, and I think one of the things worth adding, at least from our side, and I'm sure you have the same thing, right, is like we all who go out and procure services and supplies, we have these options. I mean, I was telling you about one of my number one suppliers. Guy's a veteran, right? He hasn't filled out all the forms and checked all the boxes, and I'm sure he needs a group like yours to help him kind of do all that. But we all have the power to kind of make some of those small decisions and look for a supplier that maybe hasn't been given that chance before, and we all have those options to make those decisions. I live in Florida, and our mayor, not to get political, but he basically made a law that government buyers cannot make decisions based on environmental sustainability and carbon footprint and things of that nature for government suppliers, which is an unfortunate view in a state of Florida that's going to be massively impacted by climate change, but that's a 3-hour conversation for another day. I think the point is that all of us do probably make some level of buying decisions and procurement decisions, and so I think it may seem like a $7 trillion problem that is insurmountable, but I always like to say within sustainability, all of us can make a little drop in the bucket and make a small difference.
state of Wisconsin, since he's from Florida, there is current legislation that wants to remove diversity and the word ethnic out of supplier diversity. Completely, it just has to be suppliers. It is currently situated, I don't know when they're going to bring it up for vote, but that's happening in the state of Wisconsin, ladies and gentlemen. That's happening right now. And so when you're thinking about your ESG policies, cannot be superficial. Everybody wants the prime suppliers, but think about the gap that's going to exist if we're only using prime suppliers. Those individuals that are class 2 and under, $10 million and under, $1 million and under, how do we get them to increase their revenue and get contracts? How do we teach them? How do we educate them? How do we have them become subcontractors within your organizations? So think about that a little bit too.
Thank you both, and I really like the idea of everybody being able to do something. So, I have a couple of more questions, but I know that we're also getting to the end of time, so I thought I'd pause and see if there were any questions from the audience. Please.
So you guys,
Yep, it's on.
okay. You guys just touched on one of the things that I both love and find challenging about ESG space, which is it's kind of historically been this grassroots thing. It's like everybody can do their one thing. But I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about if you made the CFO responsible for these things, they would actually get done. So I'm curious, are you seeing more C-suite folks being the ones who are saying, no, this is the way that we're going to do it? And it doesn't have to be grassroots. We're saying we're going to do it this way in our company.
Great question.
I think from an environmental sustainability perspective, the classic, or at least what they're teaching now within sort of sustainability education, is that you need both. You can't just have the CEO, the CFO saying top down, here's what we're going to do. You also need the grassroots efforts from folks, with the, sort of rank and file employees, if you will, pushing up, and you need both, top down, and you need bottom up. So that's the classic sort of theory within sustainability. That's what the ISSP, the International Society of Sustainability Professionals, that's what they'll tell you on their website. That's classic sort of sustainability education at this point. I'll let you answer from a DEI perspective. I don't know if it's the same.
Well, I have 10 companies that just backed out of DEI and supplier diversity. So the political game is being played very blatantly and in open forum. And I always share with people, I hate the word buy-in because you shouldn't have to buy in to doing the right thing, but you got to have buy-in. And I agree that from an organizational perspective, you need top and bottom, but also the political landscape as well, and how do you advocate for that? Especially when there's a legislation sitting right on someone's desk right now that's going to change the landscape on how I do my work and the agency does its work. I would say there's probably more supporters of supplier diversity in DEI than there are detractors, but the detractors get the loudest voice. So how do we balance that? That's something that you have to think about.
Something from my perspective, it really depends on the company. So fortunately for me and others from MilliporeSigma, we have a lot of support from the higher ups saying, let's be sustainable. Like, what do we need to do to improve? What do we need to do? Asking the experts from internal how we can achieve goals. And it's really different than from company to company from what I've seen. And it's cool being in a group like this. You have the leadership that is trusting these targets, and you have the people actually doing it, and they feel good to go out there and make changes. And there is a connection between companies like that and then also companies that set 2030 goals that are already claiming that they're not going to achieve those goals. So it really depends on the company. Like I said, MilliporeSigma is fortunate enough to have a lot of people that are pushing and supportive and have funds and to do that, sustainability operations is still cost savings. It's not everything is more expensive, but you need people to put together that data and the justification for projects and to like support kind of the changes and stuff. But at face value, just having a small sustainability team that is kind of sheltered and trying to do their best, but only has so much weigh-in because they don't have leadership, it's kind of impossible to meet these aggressive targets.
Thanks, Dustin. And that is kind of leads really well into the next question that I had for us to consider. And we're getting short on time, but I still think that this is a really important question that will be of interest to our participants today is, what are the benefits of implementing ESG? We've talked about some of the costs, some of the challenges, but there are so many benefits. And again, we're getting short on time, but I definitely want to hear what everybody has to say. And thanks everybody for your patience while we chat about this. So Dustin, you want to go?
So being conscious of time, there's two things our company has benefited from this. Is first off, I think you got the theme is innovation. So it's pushing us to go out there and find new cool, interesting things, new solar panels to put up, new renewable energy sources, new packaging devices. Innovation is a huge benefit to us, but also in the core of sustainability, efficiency is also just a natural benefit of any company, because efficiency meaning we're reducing our energy that we're using to make the same materials. We are being more ergonomic with our users that are at pack stations or doing laborious work. We're not going through people that are getting all stressed out. And we're also being more efficient about all of the materials that we ship out too. We're putting more on a truck. So yeah, efficiency is huge, and innovation is what we stand to gain.
Kamaljit?
I would say, I'm going to flip that question a little bit. How have we benefited the economy? Let me give you some stats. Minority-owned firms generated $2.3 trillion in revenue to the economy nationally, have created 9.5 million jobs they've created and retained those jobs. That's our work. We benefit from that because we have more MBEs getting contracts. We see more MBEs on construction sites. We see more MBEs opening small businesses in your community and getting those federal contracts or corporate contracts. And I think that makes me feel really good, even though we have a $7 trillion disparity. I look to the good. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of jobs that we've created because of the work that we do. So I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, I think ESG, if you look at it, is in the broadest sense of across all three, right? I think within healthcare, the G is incredibly important. If you think about bioethics committees, you think about safety committees, you think about the work that we're doing within healthcare, it needs to meet governance standards, and those need to have clarity and disclosures around them. So I think that's a key piece. If you take the other two, the E and the S, right, I think it's about colleague engagement. It's about attracting the best and the brightest to work at your organization, and then keeping them there, right? I think there's 100 studies out there around colleague engagement and talent turnover with companies that have a clear ESG message and a clear ESG goals and funding behind those. I think for us, we see the benefits are engaging within different communities, both to recruit patients for clinical research, engaging with potentially new customers, but also new colleagues and people that might work at ThermoFisher, even if they're middle schoolers, right? We're in this for the long haul of, the kid, the 12-year-old who won, in 10 years after she graduates from, wherever she goes to college, maybe she goes and works at ThermoFisher, or maybe her friend does, right? So I think it's not necessarily what happens in that short term, like what happens next year. You have to look at it in what's going to happen 20 years down the road, if you're able to kind of keep that long view, right? And if you're looking at a sustainability target of 2050 or 2030, if you're looking at how is my ESG platform benefiting the community, it's not just what happens tomorrow, it's what happens in 30 years.
In 2045, what's going to happen? Were you guys paying attention?
It's going to be cooking 50%.
Exactly to his point. The future is going to be very different.
Yeah. Well, we are just a little bit over time, so I hope you will join me in thanking Dustin, Kamaljit, and Michael for sharing some really valuable insights. And to the extent that you guys have other questions, I'm going to volunteer these guys. They're going to be milling about this afternoon. Please feel free to touch base with them individually. They're great resources. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.